All right, the Modern Learner from Deloitte. So this is available online. I found this online, and I know some of it may be hard for you all to read, and I'm not going to go through all of it. Just wanted to highlight a few things to get us thinking about that are specifically really related to training purposes given the current environment. So when this first came out, Deloitte found that it's about 5 years old, like I said, and they found that working professionals are interrupted as much as every 5 minutes, usually, ironically, by work applications or collaboration tools that they are using specifically for their job. Now, I would argue that's probably even worse now that we're all working from home. You're probably getting interrupted even more frequently, if not from your work-related things, from your pet or your children or whatever you are having to deal with, in addition to your day-to-day work life. So I think that's something important to keep in mind. Another interesting thing that stood out to me on this is that most learners in this study, they found that most learners won't watch a video that's longer than 4 minutes. So that's something else to keep in mind. And then the biggest takeaway is there in the middle, which Deloitte found that about 1% of a typical work week is all that people have to focus on training and development. And that's just 24 minutes a week. And I think most of us are asking a lot more than that out of our learners sometimes. So just some food for thought. This infographic, again, is available all over the internet. If you just Google Meet the Modern Learner and Deloitte, and then you go to like Google Images, it's one of the first things that you can find there. I've seen it kind of floating around on several presentations, but I thought it was a good representation of kind of what we are seeing right now as the modern learner. But with that, I do want to introduce our Learning and Development Coordinator, Amanda Valdivieso. Amanda is going to be kicking us off and leading us through our panelist presentations today. Amanda?
Yes, thank you, Jordan. Thank you so much. Yes, everyone, my name is Amanda Valdivieso, and I am the Learning and Development Coordinator for NASPO, and I am so happy that everyone is here for our second part of our Virtual Learning Best Practices webinar. So just to give you a quick overview, so we're going to quickly look over part one, what we discussed last week with Laurie Brown, our facilitator, and then we're going to jump into the main portion of our presentation this week, which is our best practices and challenges. We're going to talk with three amazing trainers from Virginia, Wisconsin, and Florida, and they're going to go over their challenges and their best practices and solutions they've come up with to handle converting everything to virtual learning during this whole crisis. Then after that, we're going to put everything together, and right before we end, we will talk a little bit about some of the NASPO resources available to you guys as members and non-members alike for your virtual learning needs. So with that, last week, Laurie Brown had gone into the science behind how adults learn and demonstrated the ways that we can incorporate this science into our virtual learning through different online tools. If you go in the chat box, can anyone name some of the tools we might have used during that session if you were part of it or listened to it, or any of the tools we discussed during that session? You can just put them in the chat box. Yes, Elmo, Kahoot. Yes, we used Kahoot. If everyone remembers, that was a fun game tool that we got to use. Polls, we did get to use polls. Wheel Decide was an excellent tool as well. Wonderful. So everyone really got a lot out of the toolbox training that we had. Great. Perfect. So in addition to those tools, we also learned about the myths and facts behind how our brains learn, and we talked about the 6 trumps. For instance, movement trumps sitting, images trump words, etc. And then we finished up talking about those 4 C's of developing a instructional design model, and that's connection, concepts, concrete practice, and conclusions. And we talked about Maslow hierarchy. Yes, I apologize. I do have several dogs in the house, and if there's a mailman running around, you know how they get. So with that in mind, Jordan will be putting the YouTube video link up in the chat. If you want a refresher or weren't able to be on the part 1 webinar, he is going to put that in the chat box as a link. And we're also going to put the link for your part 1 as well as the video for part 2 in the email that's going to be sent out after this webinar is over. So there's the link to the recording for part 1. All right. So now let's go ahead and get started with the meat and potatoes of today's presentation, and that is the best practices. Just a few housekeeping rules on this. What we're going to do is if you have any questions for the trainers as they go through their presentation, please raise your hand and Jordan or I will unmute you so you can speak, or if you want, put your questions in the chat box, and then we'll be having them answer the questions after each presentation. And then at the end of the last presentation, we'll open it up for any general questions for the three of them or any follow-up questions that you might have had. So with that, let's go ahead and start with Jessica Potter. She's the Senior Staff Development Program Specialist from Wisconsin. Jessica, I'm going to try to share this with you right now.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody.
There you
Let's see if I have control. Maybe.
So
You
Jessica,
should
I
have.
found that there was a couple of seconds of a delay, so just keep that in mind.
Good to know.
go.
Let's see if I can resume and then take over. Yes, it's working. Woo!
Woo!
So Wisconsin has a very limited training program in the sense of what we're capable of bringing. We can bring a very robust in-person training. We do offer 9 classes, and as soon as the slide responds and goes back like I told it to, it should. Maybe. Give it another second. It's not working for me. Can I get you to maybe take over the slides for me?
I'll go ahead and take over.
Perfect.
Okay, there you go.
Awesome, thank you. So right now, Wisconsin really only offers in-person trainings, at least before the pandemic. We have lots of long-term plans to build these really awesome hybrid and just e-learning content, but we're still very early in the development phase. We're working on our first class right now, and that one itself, probably, we were hoping to have it done by the summer, and the first half might be done by the summer, but even that first whole class, we're not ready with. So we're a long way off from being able to just have everybody take everything online right now. Like I was saying, we offer 9 in-person courses. These classes are offered about 3 times a year, which usually breaks down to about 1 class every 2 weeks from the end of February through the beginning of December. And 8 of those are full-day trainings and 1 of them's a half-day, and they're all taught by our central bureau staff. So our subject matter experts, many of which are the supervisors in our bureau. So everybody has a lot on their plate at the best of times. So if we can go forward. Great. So during the pandemic, we obviously still have to offer trainings. And after a lot of thought and a lot of discussions, we've discovered that webinars are really the only option available to us. And most of us probably know webinars are not the best way to do all of our trainings. We really like having our in-person classes. Under the best of circumstances, it's difficult for people to absorb as much information. You're not getting that interaction, the group discussions generally. Those exercises that we've spent a lot of time developing, we just don't have them available in a webinar setting. But we are determined to make the best of a bad situation. So what we've done is we sat down and we had a long brainstorming session to really identify all of the potential roadblocks and concerns and make plans to alleviate the biggest headaches and to make a plan forward. So if we can go one more slide forward, and we're going to stay on that one for quite a while. Our roadblocks and concerns. So we've identified kind of some overarching categories, and I'm going to go through kind of the questions that we were asking ourselves. And we don't always necessarily have solutions to these, but hopefully by identifying the questions that we came up with and the concerns that we have, it'll help anybody else in this situation too. So for technology limitations, do all the audiences that you need to reach, for example, for us, we have to reach both agencies and the University of Wisconsin system campuses. Do they all have access to the same programs and applications? And are their rules flexible? For example, can they join a Skype meeting, but if they host their own webinar or group, does it have to be maybe through Teams? Or are there certain apps and programs that are just off limit for audiences? So for example, in my agency, if I'm going to post any kind of a video online, that has to be posted through the agency's YouTube channel. Unfortunately, there's some other agencies in Wisconsin that just are explicitly not allowed to access YouTube, period. So that really limits what we're able to do. We can't, for example, record a nice webinar, something we've done perfectly once, post it online and know that everybody can access it. It's just we're not able to do that. Another question we have is, are your trainers comfortable using the technology available to them? So some people are just hesitant to use programs that they haven't had to use much before. If something goes wrong in the webinar, are they going to have the expertise to get through it? Some people will, and some people just aren't going to be comfortable with it and will need a little bit more hand-holding. For home office limitations, think about the home offices that your trainers and your participants are in. So how quiet is their environment? And so there are going to be a lot of interruptions for them. Do they have to share their space with others? Like, do they have child care responsibilities that they need to take care of? Are they going to be able to fully participate for the whole length of your training? And how good are their internet and phone connections? If they're wirelessly connected, their connection might not be as stable as otherwise. Most home connections, at least in our area, aren't nearly as fast as they are at work. We have pretty decent internet at work. Some of us are working off of limited wireless connection at home. And if a participant's connection is poor, or if they're connected wirelessly, the sound quality might be impacted. The effectiveness of screen sharing might be impacted. We're seeing delays right now with us. Similar things happen in our trainings as well. And a lot of our trainers know the material backward and forward, but if they're working out of their basements and they don't have great cell phone reception, and they don't have a headset or a mic on their computer, it doesn't matter how good their content knowledge is. They can't share that with anybody, and the training's going to be ineffective. For audio challenges, like while sound quality can be better when people join using their computer's audio, that's not always an option. So in Wisconsin, you'll notice I'm the only one here not sharing my video. It's because our computers don't have videos. We're lucky if our computers have sound cards. A lot of them we get it built without the sound card put in, let alone microphones or headsets or anything like that. So you have to take that into account when you're considering what type of training and what you're going to be able to accomplish. If participants or trainers are going to be on a cell phone, you're going to have to think about the phone's battery, especially depending on how long your training is going to be. And are people going to be able to participate with their phone plugged in? Which seems like a pretty simple problem with an easy solution, but it might turn into a bigger deal than you anticipate. Is a participant going to have a headset to use, or are they going to have to use their cell phone the whole time and hold it to their head or put it on speakerphone? And is that going to affect the effectiveness? Will echoes and background noise be distracting to everybody? Do you have an ability to limit that? Can you mute everybody? And if you can mute everybody some of the time, does it matter if they're connected through the computer audio or through a cell phone? Because depending on which program I use, I have limited ability to mute everybody. Scope and time frame. So what is your training scope during the pandemic? Are you going to be offering every training that's available normally? Are you going to split your classes into the essential, we need to have these, and the optional, it's just nice to have these? Do you cancel anything that's not essential, or do you offer the full gamut? If you don't offer a specific class, is there going to be any ramifications to that? So will anybody not be able to do their job because you don't offer that class right now? Or is the class that you canceled a prerequisite for anything else? Also, how far out do you plan to continue with these modified trainings? Do you limit it to only this month? Do you extend it through June? Do you look to July and beyond? Once you're able to get back with groups of people, are people going to be comfortable getting into groups again? Do you announce your plans immediately, or do you only share a limited amount for a short period of time? And it's really going to depend on what you and your supervisors and your government or department decide to do. I've heard of a lot of different opinions on this so far. For the effectiveness of the training, webinars are just a tough medium for trainings at the best of time, and it's easy for participants to multitask. Jordan was hitting on that before. It's easy to get distracted or just to zone out. But even built on that, we're seeing a dramatic decrease in people's ability to absorb information right now. I'm doing a number of DocuSign trainings, and I'm talking like 3, 4, or 5 or more during a week, consistently for several weeks now. And I'm consistently having the same people come back to me with the same questions time and time again across the board. And that didn't happen before the work from home order or the pandemic. People just are not absorbing that info right now. And I know we talked some about Maslow's hierarchy of needs last time. I think a lot of it has to play into that. And if you want to talk more about that, I'm your girl. Come find me later, send me an email. we can chat. And you also just need to understand that you might have to retrain the participants down the road, or offer some sort of refresher. And that needing to do that isn't a reflection of anything that you're doing wrong. It's just the current reality that we're all living in. For content creation and delivery, for the most part, you can't just take a PowerPoint and materials that are developed for an in-person class and then drop them right into a webinar and be good to go. You're going to need to make some alterations or remove or change some content, figure out what you're doing with your exercises, and probably break up your training into much smaller chunks. But how much time do you devote to making these kinds of changes? Will the changes continue to have value in the long term, or are you only making these changes to happen during these unprecedented times? And are there any updates or modifications that you could make that would be beneficial to your training program down the road? Or would making those take up too much time and you just need to get something out right now? For example, at my bureau, we talked about creating user guides for each of our classes. And those user guides could really just walk somebody through creating a bid or creating a proposal or any number of things that we train on. And those could absolutely be used later on and to be very, very helpful, in fact. But developing those would just take so much time that there's no way that we could get them out in a meaningful point of time. We'd put ourselves way, way behind the curve. So while it's a great idea, it's just not something we can move forward with right now. And when you think about scheduling the classes, how long are you going to have each session be, and how often are you going to hold them? We found that 1 hour chunks are fairly readily digestible by people, but that could mean scheduling, 6 or more webinars for a single full day class, which might not be possible. In Wisconsin next week, we're going to be teaching 3 full day classes, or at least what would be full day classes if they were taught in person. On Tuesday, we're doing our Intro to Procurement class, and we've broken that one down into 2 90-minute chunks. That's going to have one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So we've taken out some of the content, we've taken out the exercises, and really are just hitting on the high notes and the absolute most important stuff that we need people to know. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to do our bid and proposal class. And each of those will be 2 hour chunks, again, in the morning and afternoon, with a 2 hour break in between. It's not ideal, but we're going to make it work. And then the other thing to think about is what kind of support are your trainers going to need? Do they need help monitoring the chat box for written questions? Because it's not easy to deliver the content and answer all the questions and manage maybe a webinar system that you're not used to doing. For our workshops, like the DocuSign trainings, we do just fine when it's a single workshop with a single trainer, just for 1 hour. But for next week's classes, we're definitely having 2 trainers in each one, and they're going to switch off delivering content and monitoring that chat box. For the handouts and materials, most of the time materials developed for an in-person training just aren't going to be a good fit for that webinar style training, so you are going to have to modify them a bit. But again, how much time do you devote to updating those materials, the handouts and whatnot? And what about your class exercises? Usually that's some of the best interactions you're going to get during a training. How are you going to be able to offer those? And are you going to be able to offer those? Like I said before, we're pulling the exercises from next week's trainings, not necessarily because they're not valuable, even if we did them with just the instructor going through them and talking with the group. But we needed to pull them for time. So there's a lot of reasons why you might need to pull them or might not want to. And then what about the handouts and materials that you do have to share with everybody? Are you happy sharing them through a screen share? Are you concerned that things might get blurry, that people won't be able to see exactly what you're looking at? Do you need them to be able to print things out or write notes on something or have dual monitors? In Wisconsin, most people were sent home with either the laptop they worked on or their desktop and 1 monitor. We're not working off of 2 monitors anymore like we were used to. And a lot of us don't have printers at home. So if I need to get materials to somebody and they have to have hard copies, I have to figure out a way to print them out and send them out to everybody. For trainer flexibility and availability, how available are your trainers right now? Have they been assigned to additional tasks and to help people deal with the emergency? Are they covering for coworkers who are sick or who need to take time off? How are they coping with the pandemic in general? And are they capable of doing as much right now as they were just a few months ago? And how resilient are they? Are they comfortable going with the flow? Are they able to just jump into different situations with ease? Or are your trainers, are they the type of person that tend to get stressed easily when faced with change in uncertain situations? And none of that is a bad thing on any one person. It's just the way people react to situations sometimes. So how are they going to react to being asked to teach a series of webinars? Especially ones where they're going to get limited feedback from the audience, and they're essentially going to feel like they're talking to themselves like I do right now. And they're using a technology that they might not be familiar with while they're delivering material that's different than they're used to. Some trainers are going to go fine. They're going to be just fine delivering stuff in a new situation. Some of them aren't going to be. And you need to know your trainers well enough to be able to judge that. For the one that I didn't know was going to be such a big deal, attendance tracking. Oh my goodness. How are you going to track attendance? We don't have a great LMS system, a learning management system here in Wisconsin. We kind of have a homegrown one and are waiting to implement kind of a enterprise-wide, statewide system that both the agencies and campuses will have access to, but we don't have that right now. So how do you track attendance in webinars when we're using something like Skype or Zoom or Teams or whatever? Are you able to download a reliable list from the system that you're using for the webinar? And does it always show somebody's name, or does it say guest or their phone number? And what are you going to do if a group of people join together so they only have one connection? How do you know if they've stayed for the whole training? If your training's broken up into multiple parts, what happens if somebody misses one or more of those? What's your cutoff? How do you track it? And does it even really matter? How much of a concern is this going to be for you? And how concerned are you going to be about ensuring that people are actually paying attention the whole time? And that sounds silly, sounds funny, especially for a trainer, but it's something you need to consider. And do you have people type their names in the chat box? You know, will you be able to download that list later? Can you capture it before leaving the room? Do you provide people with a code word at the end of each session and have them email that to a specific person? Or do you just kind of outline your expectations at the beginning of the training, lay, you know, a little bit of a minor guilt trip and just assume or hope that people are going to do the right thing? Lots of different ways to handle this situation. One more slide. There we go. So just a couple lesson learns with the DocuSign trainings that we were running. So these are 1-hour webinars that we're doing. We're providing concise, concrete overview of actually using the system, doing a couple very simple tasks where I'm sharing my screen with them and running through our training. What we're seeing is that we have to just adjust our expectations. You need to make sure that you're available for follow-up questions. They're just not absorbing the information the same way that they were before. They're not retaining that information, even if you're providing them with written guides and resources that are available online. There's just not that interaction, and there's a lot going on. People just aren't able to retain things. We're seeing people just hesitate to ask questions, even if they're prompted, even if you give them a lot of time and space, and it really just feels that you're talking to yourself. So best of luck. I know Florida and Virginia have been doing a lot more than Wisconsin's been able to. So I raised a lot of questions, and hopefully they're going to be able to give you some more answers.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jessica. So we did have, if anyone has any questions for Jessica, please feel free to type in the chat box, raise your hand. I know we did have a couple of questions pop up here. Someone had asked, did you find that participant names can get creative and not reflect their real name? In parentheses, I've seen computer models as names.
When they're automatically generated, we have gotten some weird names. We haven't resorted to having people type them into the chat box yet, though, so
Wonderful.
Not yet, but I can imagine that happening for sure.
Wonderful. And I had another one. Melissa Blount had made a comment. She just said for attendance, they had taken screenshots of before and after employees listed for their Zoom meetings, I guess, as a way to track their attendance. And
yep,
then
absolutely.
Someone else asked how big your classes were.
So when we do in-person classes, it's limited by the size of the room, obviously. So it's either 20 or 30 people. Doing webinars here, the classes next week, we've opened it up to 75 people. And I have about 40 in one and 30 something in another. We'll see how it goes.
All right. And then Joe Kim has, I'm going to unmute him so he can ask his question. Joe, go ahead. You have your hand raised. It's unmuting him. Jordan, are you able to unmute him? For some reason, it's not letting me.
Yeah, I'm trying. Joe, you may have to accept something on screen that says allowed to talk. There we go.
How about now?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, perfect. Hey, I'm sorry. And so maybe really the question's been answered. I don't know what the Kirkpatrick scale is, but so you had mentioned that you had taken out the questions and some of the problems that you would have discussed in an in-person class. And that's one way of, I guess, of gauging some competency. So is it really now just one direction? I mean, is it really just a flow of information and you're waiting for people to ask questions, you know, or are you building in problems that you've anticipated as examples? So I guess I'm the same kind of question that was asked earlier. I'm just looking for how are you assessing it all that people are understanding what you're sharing?
We are delivering information and hoping that they're going to follow up with an email or a phone call later, asking questions if they have any issues. We fully expect to offer some kind of refresher or have them join us in an in-person class later on. We're just trying to meet the minimum requirements right now so that people can get their job done. And we don't have any kind of certification program here in Wisconsin. It's really just giving them the information they need in order to get their procurements done.
All right. We had a couple other questions. Marchetta wanted to know, have you gotten feedback from your attendees as to what is hard for them?
Yeah, we held a cost benefit analysis class last week, which was normally just a half-day class for us, and it turned into a 90-minute webinar. And they appreciated that we were still offering the classes, but they were saying that they were just struggling to pay attention, that they realized that it was on them, but that they would hear their email chime and, either go check it or fight the urge to go check it, or somebody would walk in the room behind them, or one of their kids would come over. They're doing their best, but it's just a struggle right now.
All right. Another question is, do you ever do end of class quizzes where the students take a short quiz to show competency and attendance?
Nope, we do send out an anonymous survey at the end, but again, since it's anonymous, we don't know for sure that they're there. Normally, if it's an in-person class, they initial on the sign-in sheet, but that's really it.
I think we might have another class. Christy wants to know, are your subject matter experts / trainers still working in emergency procurement mode? And if so, how have you balanced the time to redevelop the classes?
Yes, they are definitely still in emergency procurement mode, and some of them have even been temporarily reassigned to our emergency team. Basically, our brand new state procurement director has taken over redesigning the classes, and she's going to be delivering all 3 classes next week with the help of one other section chief.
Wonderful. All right. Other than that, I think that's all the questions we have right now. We had a couple of comments. Luis had said Adobe Connect's a good tool to track time and attendance, attention, etc. And Mentimeter is a great tool that they use with Adobe Connect. And then Richard has suggested taking a look at ahaslides.com. So some great suggestions from the chat on different tools to use. If there's no other questions for Jessica, we're going to move on to the other Jessica then. Thank you, Jessica, so much for your sharing your information with us.
My pleasure.
All right. So Jessica Adams is up next, and she is the Chief Learning Officer for the Department of General Services Division of Purchases and Supply in Virginia. So Jessica, I'll go ahead and do the slides for you, but let me know when you want me to proceed.
All right, go for it. Click forward. Hooray. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background, before the pandemic, our training offered by the Virginia Institute of Procurement, which we usually shorten to VIP, which we enjoy. It was mostly classroom instructional-led training, but we also had a little bit of asynchronous online training. We didn't have any live virtual quite yet. We have 3 certification programs, which all need to be renewed every 5 years. We have the Virginia Contracting Associate, which is a VCA, and Virginia Contracting Officer, VCO, Virginia Contracting Master, VCM, and then we also have continuing education courses to help folks to renew those certifications every year. For VCA, we ask that during their renewal period, each learner gets 20 hours of continuing education hours. For VCO, 60 hours. For VCM, it's 60 hours plus management level courses. So we want to make sure that we're offering courses to help out with this. We hold courses from any part of the year except for January for weather concerns, July because that's usually when our new policy comes out and we have to revamp all of our courses within that month. And then we don't hold courses generally in November because that's when we hold our forum, which is our procurement conference. So that's basically where we were before all of this happened. You can go ahead and click forward one. Okay, so we had a challenge. We were just about to start with our spring courses, which is heavily laden with VCA, which is, as it's offered 8 to 10 times per year, it's basically our meat and potatoes course. It's the one that most people are taking when they come to us. So we had to try to figure out how we could continue to offer training for the first time, live virtual, without sacrificing the quality of the training or allowing our pass rates on the certification exam to suffer. A lot of those who take our VCA, VCO, VCM courses, sometimes their job depends on whether they're able to get this certification. Other times, in the case of VCO, we actually have that certification program written into our policy code. So your agency's delegated authority might depend on whether you have a VCO on staff. So we weren't really given the option to just stop because there are so many people who just need these certifications and needed our classes to move forward. We were given something like 2 weeks of notice. They told us we would be going to work from home pretty quickly, and so we needed to be able to move forward. So this was our big challenge, was how are we supposed to do this? We've never done live virtual before. Go ahead and click forward, if you will. Oh, too far, one back, there you go. All right, so this is what we had. We had our, what we called our toolkit. What do we have? We did have our subject matter expert trainers. We are so lucky in Virginia that helping out VIP, helping out training is written into job descriptions. So we were able to pull in the group of trainers that we have and their group of subject matter experts that help us develop the training. We were able to pull them together and try and get this going. We also have our instructional design staff. There's 3 of us. There's myself, the VCA coordinator, and then we have a newly hired on instructional designer. So with the 3 of us and with our subject matter experts, we all put our heads together. We do have a fairly new to us learning management system. We acquired it, we procured it in August of 2019. So it was fairly new to us, but we were really excited to have that in our toolkit. We have course creation software. We use Articulate 360. We made use of our survey tool that we have. We use SurveyMonkey, a polling tool. We use Poll Everywhere, and virtual classroom. We use Zoom, mostly because it integrates directly into our LMS. So that's basically what we had to work with. And without each one of these things, we wouldn't have been able to do exactly what we wanted to do. But with all of these things combined, we were able to pull it together and get something going. All right, go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so like I said, we had these VCA courses coming up. We had one at the end of March and 2 in April that were coming right up on us. I believe it was March 13th that we heard that we were going to have to be offering our March 20th class or 26th class virtually. We do have some asynchronous online training that's involved with this, which didn't need to be altered at all. We have 7 hours of that. What we were going to turn our 14-hour classroom training into 14 hours of live virtual training. We had 26 learners. We had 5 SME trainers, 1 VIP moderator, was a member of my team, and then 2 VIP exam proctors, myself and then the moderator. So this is where we started. This was our pilot. This is where we did this all for the first time. So go ahead and click forward and I'll walk you sort of through that procedure. So pre-class, redesign of activities for a virtual environment. Our classroom courses are very heavily group work oriented. So we needed to be able to take the group work that they all do and translate it into the virtual classroom. We were lucky to have Zoom and they have the breakout room feature. So we've been making heavy use of that and sending each of the groups out into breakout rooms to complete that coursework and then pulling them back in. So we worked together with the SMEs and with our VCA coordinator to figure out how each one of those group activities would translate. Some of them that were really short maybe turned into individual activities instead of group activities. The longer ones, we told the trainers, okay, this is where they'll be breaking out and then they'll be coming back in. We tried to plan those breakout sessions around natural breaks in the class, so that way we could still hold our 7 hours of class with good breaks in between each section. So I've included one of the exercise slides up here. This was a scene from when we pulled all the trainers together to tell them how each one of these things would go. So those are the people that you see in the right hand there. The other thing is we already converted our certification exam into a computer-based exam, but it was always offline. And we always held those exams in the classroom and not in the LMS. So we had to try to figure out, okay, how do we take this computer-based exam, sure, but make it still secure, put it online, and be able to proctor it without having to ask people to come in. So we have, I never really got into who our audience is, but we service executive branch agencies, we service university systems, localities. You can basically be from anywhere utilizing public funds in Virginia and want to come take one of our courses. So we had a wide variety of people who would need to take this and just couldn't come into Richmond, even to do a one-on-one proctored exam. So we had to figure out how we did that. So one of the first things we did was we surveyed the learners, particularly in this March class, because this was all new for everybody. So we utilized that survey tool to send out a survey to all of the learners asking them, okay, do you have a high-speed internet connection? Can you get one? Do you have a webcam or a smartphone? That's another good thing about Zoom is we were able to utilize the app. So if they didn't have a webcam, do you have access to a smartphone that you could use instead? And then do you have access to our LMS? And for the most part, they all did. I believe our first class that was meant to be 30, we had 4 who rescheduled themselves to another class, mostly because they were nervous about taking the class online. Those 4 actually have since taken the class online in either of our April classes. So even those first 4 who didn't really feel comfortable, they were all able to get in. So we were lucky there. All right, and then we contacted all the trainers, of course, and walked through all of their sections. Okay, here's how this is all gonna run. And they were told under no circumstances were they gonna be left alone because one of our VIP moderators would be with them. All right, click forward. I have a lot of slides. So this is kind of an example of what we did. And I know the lettering is small and normally I wouldn't do this, but this is a sample of what we sent out to learners before the class to explain how the exam would work. We sent them out a long document telling them how to use Zoom, how to use the Zoom tools, inviting them to a webinar ahead of time to test their video, test their sound, answer any kind of questions they have. And this was sort of a snippet of that where we told them, okay, this is how the exam is going to look, and here's how you'll be able to navigate through it. So I wanted to include this so you could kind of see how we were communicating with the learners. I'm not going to read through it. You can go ahead and click forward. All right, so during class, so after we've contacted everybody, we've gotten everybody lined up signed up in the LMS, we've got all the trainers ready to go. How do we do this? So we did that pre-class webinar where we showed everybody the virtual classroom tools. It should look a little familiar. I know that we're running this one, I think, as a webinar, but we run our classes as a meeting. So you can see all the tools that we utilize down there at the bottom. We did have that nice little fun hiccup when Zoom was in the news a few weeks ago. We were in the middle of one of our VCA classes when we heard that we were no longer going to be able to use Zoom under any circumstances. And they were the only ones that we could think of that had the breakout room feature that we had already purchased, because we also simultaneously received notice that we would not be allowed to buy anything to replace it. So what we ended up doing is we actually went into the Zoom security tools, worked out a set of security protocols that we were going to follow. We utilized the waiting rooms. We have learners register for the class so that you have to be pre-registered in. You cannot change your name once you come in, so we know from the waiting room who you are and we can let them in. Learners can't share their screens, so on, so on, so on. So once we wrote all of that up, we thankfully were given permission to keep moving forward. But it was a nice afternoon where we thought we were going to have to try and find another tool that we weren't even allowed to buy. One thing that really helps out is we let the trainers train and we have the moderator moderate. So whenever we have to go out into the breakout rooms, that's what the moderator does. And then the trainer then goes into each of the rooms to talk to each of the groups and make sure that they're all taking good notes, that they're all working together. And this has that double benefit of making sure that everyone is participating the way that they should. The learners never really know when they're going to be sent out into their breakout rooms. And the groups come to, and a 2-day course, they come to depend on each other, and they'll tell on each other and say, oh, well, they weren't at their desk and they weren't talking. So it really helped out being able to still be able to do that group work to keep everybody involved. All right, click forward. All right, and I'm watching my time. Okay, so the big thing here was, how are we going to proctor this exam that we've always proctored in person? So what we worked out is trying to make sure the learners and the proctors had as few needs as possible while still being as secure as possible. So here's where we came up with: the learner needs to have the internet access. They need to have the LMS account, which they should have because that's how they registered for the class. They need to have that webcam or smartphone, and they need to have screen shares permissions. We were able to get permission to do that for the exam only. The proctors need to have internet access, admin access to the LMS, webcam or smartphone, and then host capability in the virtual classroom. And that is mostly because of how we structured this exam. We hold the exam within Zoom, and I'll show you, I've got a couple of slides here coming up to show you kind of how we do that, because again, we were told we weren't allowed to buy anything. So I've heard some states say that they utilize ProctorU or some other kind of company. We just didn't have the ability. We're not allowed to spend any money. So go ahead and click forward and I'll show you how we did that. So this right here is an image of our learning management system. And every person in the Commonwealth who has a public email address has the ability to set up an account within our system. So you register for our classes there. You get all of our notices from there. It's been a godsend. It's a really good system, and I'll more than happily share it with anybody how we managed to get that set up. So go ahead and click forward one more. This is the dashboard. This is my personal dashboard right here. So what we'll ask the learners to do when it's time for them to take the exam is we say, before you get in with us, go ahead, log into your account in the learning management system. All right, click forward. All right, and scroll down and you'll see the VCA exam course. We enroll everybody in that course just before they take it. One of the first things we wanted to do is, okay, how can we make sure that they're able to access the course, but we're not enrolling them right when they're supposed to be taking it, when we're supposed to be actually walking them through the course. So we put in a few little stop gaps to make sure that they're able to access it before we're talking to them, but they're not actually able to get into the exam until we're right there with them. So click forward one more. So this is our honor code. And that was my dog being ridiculous. All right, so this is the honor code where they fill out their name, their agency. We wrote this computer-based version of the exam in 2017, and we've tweaked it a few ways just to make sure that we're able to get it into our LMS. So this is their honor code. This is the very first thing that they see. They're able to do this before their actual proctored exam, or they can do it right when they get with us. All right, click forward one more. This is where they can't go any further until they actually are in the exam with us. When they click begin, they're offered the chance to put in a code, which changes every couple of weeks, every couple of months, depending on how often we're holding the class. All of our certification exams are standardized this way. All right, go ahead and click one more. So here's an actual image, and I put a nice little black circle over her face. After they've gotten to that particular point, they're given a Zoom invite to come into the exam space. Each proctor has 8 to 10 folks in their exam space at any one time. That proctor then sends each learner into their own breakout room. So each learner has their own space. Once they get into the breakout room, they're asked to share their screen and turn on their webcam or their cell phone. So that way at all times we can see their screen and we can see them at any point that we come into the exam. They're also told that the exam is being recorded. We would delete these recordings. We record locally. It was one of our caveats that we had to be able to use Zoom. We record locally and we hold that just in case something goes wrong. One thing that we ask the learners before they even come into class is, what is a good number to reach you should your exam crash or should your webcam go out? So during the exam, the proctor will go into those breakout rooms one at a time, just sort of poke their head in to see how the learner's doing, whether they're still on the screen, all that other good stuff. So this is basically how we've managed to proctor the exam and still keep it as secure as we possibly can. We do let the learners use scratch paper during the exam. Before they get started, we ask them to show us their desk, show us their workspace, and also show us their blank piece of paper that they're going to use as scratch paper. At the end of the exam, when we're closing it out, we ask them again to show us that piece of paper. And if they've written anything that's proprietary on it, we just ask them to rip it up for us. Normally we would take that up, but of course we don't really have the ability to do that when they're at their home and I'm in mine. All right, click forward one more time. So what happened? So our pilot class that was in March had a 78% pass rate. Our baseline for a pass rate, which was our 2019 pass rate, is 83%. We worked with some lessons learned from that pilot. Technology never does really what you want it to do. And we came up with different changes for the 2 April classes, which one wrapped up just last week. And we were able to get that pass rate to go way up. We had a 93% pass rate for the second one and 92 for the third. The only way that we are able to make these changes and know what worked and what didn't work is we send out post-class surveys to the class as well as the trainers, where they can tell us exactly how did you like it? Where do you think we tripped up? What did you like the best? What would you like to see more of? And then we take that and just do an immediate turnaround of an evaluation of the course to make sure that we are always following. I mean, you're always going to get those that are the exam should have been easier. It was too hard. I'm like, oh, well, I'm sorry about that. But for the most part, we're able to take that constructive feedback and put it directly into the course and make sure that we are providing the service that we all want to provide to our learners. I think if you click forward one more, I think that might, oh, no, here we go. One last slide. So what are we gonna do? And I know it was something that Jessica brought up, is how long do you plan on doing this? One thing that we're working at right now is saying that for our 2020 classes, they're all gonna be online. We have a much larger class in June, our VCO 2-week program, which we're already underway converting that into a digital course, just because in June, we're just not sure that people are going to want to come into our classroom. We have another one in September. We have VCA classes continuing in August. So we just went ahead and started planning for all of our classes for 2020 and possibly even 2021 to be virtual. It's working out so well for us. Why not? Our conference that happens in November, we're looking at, well, how can we take what we've learned converting these classes into virtual and maybe do something like that for our conference? It's really kind of up in the air, just like everything is, but it's something that we're playing with. And then in the end, really, this is the first time we've ever done anything like this, and it's been such a great experience. Not that you are looking for anything good to happen with this whole thing, but if anything, we had sort of a jump start on our plans that we thought we weren't really going to be able to get to until 2021 or even longer, because the need wasn't really there, so the motivation wasn't really there, and now it is. So how can we use this to our advantage? And that's where we are. I'm good.
Thank you, Jessica, so much. I appreciate that. We do have a couple of questions. If anyone does have any questions for Jessica right now, go ahead and throw them in the chat or raise your hand. I know that Louise had asked a couple of questions about how the proctoring exam worked, but I think you have answered that because she asked them earlier before you went to the proctoring. Someone did ask what LMS you use.
We use Absorb.
Absorb, okay, wonderful. And then someone else asked, Jessica, are you finding that the time to do breakouts and activities takes more time, less time, or about the same time as face-to-face?
Actually, the breakouts, it really depends. For the most part, I think we're seeing them take slightly longer than they had before, but to sort of counterbalance that, during the actual trainer lecture pieces, when they're not doing group work, that is going much quicker, because you don't have those little interruptions with, there's a group in the back talking. I think there's something about classroom teachers. They said they now feel like they have all the power because they can mute people. And that's kind of how our trainers are feeling when they're actually speaking to be heard. They're not having to pause and say, okay, everybody listen up. So our breakout sessions, while they are taking longer, it's counterbalanced.
Wonderful. And then Jody had a question. She said, Jessica, we missed our first ever graduation ceremony for our newly launched certification in North Carolina. Have you missed any graduations? If you do them, that is. If so, have you done them virtually?
No, we never did any kind of graduation ceremony. I'm trying to think like how we would do that. I mean, I imagine we could probably do something at the end of the classes when we're all there to sort of be like, all right, everybody give yourself a hand. You did it. After the exam, people tend to be like, okay, am I done? Okay, thank you. And then they just drop off. But no, so we haven't done anything like that.
Okay. Luis wanted to ask one more time, how do the students actually receive the exam and how do they answer the questions? Is it done through the LMS?
Yes, the exam is actually written in Articulate Storyline. So we had always exported it for CD because we were going to be holding it offline. We rewrote a little bit of the code to make it so that it was exported as a SCORM 2004 document instead. So we uploaded it directly into our LMS. They take it in there, and then when they're finished, actually we don't necessarily want the learners to get their score right away until we've had a chance to look at their score report and make sure that everything's on the up and up. So on the actual screen that shows their score, in Storyline, there's just a big white box right there that says, congratulations, you're finished. And then from the admin side, we go in, look at what their score is, and send them their score report.
Wonderful. And I think that's Samantha, that was her same question. She was asking about how you put the exam into the LMS. And Tosca wanted to know if they can reach out to you for any direct questions related to testing.
Oh, always happy.
Wonderful. All right. I think that might be all the questions we have right now for you, Jessica. And yeah, we will be providing, just so everyone's aware, at the end of the presentation, I know Jordan will mention it, but we'll have a resources page that you will have access to that has our panelists' contact information if you had any further questions for them as well, including Laurie from last week. So if we have no other questions for Jessica, let's go ahead and move on to Daniel. And I know it says Gerard, but we actually have Daniel here with us today from Florida.
Yes, hi everybody. Very glad to be here. And Gerard had intended to be here, but as we talk about adapting to COVID, he has been temporarily reassigned to a different agency to assist with their response. So let's get started. I'll walk you through kind of Florida's process, what we're hoping to accomplish, what we're in the middle of working towards right now. I think Jessica and Jessica have given a great foundation for both things to consider as you're approaching this, and also some of the pitfalls, lessons learned, and challenges that'll come up. So if we can move forward, I'm gonna start you guys actually with a poll because we like to get some interaction. So curious to see what results here will be. I think this is gonna be overwhelming.
So far.
Yeah, right. We'll give you just a few more seconds to get in there. And I think that's a quick little measure. It looks overwhelmingly like folks are definitely planning to move training online. I think a big part of that could also be that we're not exactly sure when the COVID situation will end. And this is kind of a new normal, right? So glad to see that. So hopefully my presentation this morning or this afternoon will help you guys out with that. If we can go to the next slide, I will give you kind of the history of Florida's certified contract management class. About 365 million years ago, we were doing online training with the dinosaurs walking the earth. In 1776, we were doing, I said online, but actually in person. Sorry, I bombed these jokes. I knew that was going to happen. But in reality, in 2014, the state moved to a certification process that was a 2-day instructor-led class coupled with 8 online modules. You can see those here on the screen. We give them asynchronous online training through our stages of procurement, and then the actual 2-day classroom training is done face-to-face with a final certification exam at the end of that period that's also conducted face-to-face. So we had a lot of pieces that we need to change as well. We're working through that process now. Let me talk a little bit about what we're trying to do with COVID. So we have this 2-day class. If we'll click forward. Oh, went too far. Back one. So we're taking that instructor-led certification and doing a 3-day live webinar. Our online process will now be live 6 2-hour sessions over the course of 3 days. We are knee-deep in working through how to transition group activities to be in an online format that is accessible, easy for instructors to deliver, and at the same time offers something very similar for the activities that they would have received in a face-to-face training. We feel it's important in terms of certification to maintain that same level of quality and integrity. And then our biggest change potentially is we're actually moving into a proctored exam through a secure exam interface. The 2 companies we're using are Cavion and Examity. Essentially, we made the decision to make this purchase. I will say right up front, it is not overly expensive, but certainly not cheap to be able to offer that. And I know for some of you, hearing that Jessica has 3 instructional designers and that incredible LMS, and seeing that we're getting to spend money to proctor, we have some definite advantages with these systems. So I am aware of that, but for us, it was important to maintain the integrity of our certification exam. We do have an enterprise level LMS through our ERP system, but it didn't work for our needs for maintaining the certification exam. So we've chosen to go this alternative route. If we can move on, I'm trying to do this quickly because, like I said, I think you got a lot of the detail. So I'm really curious about this question. We'll launch the poll here as well. What are you most concerned about for moving training online? Is it cost, technology, content, engagement, legal difficulties? And we'll go just a few more seconds here to give folks a chance to complete the poll. Okay, I think we end the poll there. I'm a little surprised, but it looks like the big concern here is learner engagement. We understand that. There's a two-way street with learner engagement, right? So part of it is it's much more difficult for someone leading a webinar, even this format that we're using now, to understand where their audience is. You know, we don't have that visual face-to-face. Are they getting it? Are we keeping them checked in? But the other side of that is trusting that our learners have the time and effort and energy to be able to do an online training module, which goes back, I think, to some of the concerns that Jordan raised in the beginning about the limited amount of time folks have for professional development. I would encourage you, use polls like we have, that keeps people engaged. We also know from the literature, some of the best practices for learner engagement is having items moving on the screen. Visuals obviously work better than pictures, so we talked about that. And then another concern is sometimes the legal difficulties, and I would like to talk about that just briefly in terms of the proctoring service we're purchasing. We have spent close to 3 weeks now working through terms and conditions, you know, around data privacy, around some of the IT issues we often see, limitation of liability, warranty of data security, indemnification. So that is another concern when you're working with third-party software. So I do want you to keep that in mind as well. Let's click. So what we're doing, we looked at a number of platforms. We are currently going to use GoToTraining. A couple of reasons for that. One, like Jessica Adams mentioned, there was the Zoom security issue when we were reading and making a decision on this. So the other for us is financial. I mean, we all have budgetary constraints. We had current subscriptions already for some of the other go-to platforms. We use GoToMeeting, GoToTraining, all of those things. So we were able to expand those licenses, and it saved us essentially enough money to be able, as opposed to going with Zoom or another platform, to be able to use the Examity and Cavion proctoring service. The other benefit to GoToTraining, it is, I will be the first to admit, it is not the most intuitive user interface when you're on the backside delivering training, but there's a long history of stability with it. There is some hope that we can eventually integrate it with some of the other services and platforms that we're trying to work with. And we really liked the quizzing, polling, being able to upload materials, have them easily downloaded by audience members. That's how we're trying to keep some of our activities sort of alive and well. We're going to upload documents, scenarios, and allow them to access them as the trainer demonstrates, and then gives them a chance to do some one-on-one practice with the materials that we provide. Our approach, again, it's very collaborative. We have an instructional designer who builds all of our training courses. We're working with the instructors in a very rapid prototyping way. These 6 modules have actually been churning out about 1 every 3 days to get those ready to go live. Our target date at this point is June 2nd. So we hopefully will have some feedback that we'd love to share with you guys after that time. One of our other challenges that hopefully doesn't face, that other states don't face, our certified contract manager training is co-facilitated with our sister agency, the Department of Financial Services, who for the state of Florida handles all payment and reconciliation type of process. So we're not only trying to get our instructors and our staff up to speed on the modified training content, the revised platform that we're using, the new testing process, but we're also having to bring them into the fold as well. And in response to COVID, their agency head took a little more assertive stance than ours, and they actually were not working up until about a week ago. So that's been another challenge for us. Other things in the methodology, you know, we're really trying to think about the content timing and delivery. We want to boil down this 16-hour course into the bare essentials that still meet certification requirements, still can engage learners, but doesn't overwhelm them through the day. That's how we came up with the 2 modules per day for 3 days. The 4th day is actually going to be the testing process. And then we're working through modification of the content to address our training activities so that we can ensure that the online method of delivery matches what we're hoping the learners are able to get from the training. Okay, next. All right, so some of the things we know that we can do better, and we recommend that you guys apply as you're moving forward. These are sort of our lessons learned. Practice. No matter what platform you choose, practice the functionality, identify the roles, who's going to be the administrator, who's going to be the instructor, who's going to be support staff. What are you going to do if your instructor is in the middle of a session and suddenly they lose internet connectivity? So think through and practice a bunch of contingencies to make sure you really understand all the functionality and features of your platform. If you can identify the platform early, you know what you're going to use the strengths of that platform to really develop your content. It will help you. For instance, we know that one of the best features in GoToTraining is the polling aspect. So we're going to use polling as much as we can. And then the other side of it is always communicate. In times of change, in times of uncertainty, it's always better to over communicate. So ensure you're communicating with your training partners, your stakeholders, within the team. Try to understand any differences, concerns that team members might have. And just communicate, communicate, communicate. Next. So certification testing for us, currently in person, we require 80% to pass. If an individual does not do that on the first attempt, our instructors will do a quick remediation session, going through some of the key learning objectives with them, and then they will be given a second attempt to reach that 80%. As we move this to online, however, with our new proctoring entity, that's not going to be an option. So we are going to have them hit the 80% mark. They'll be allowed 2 attempts, but it will not be one immediate attempt and then remediation and a second attempt. They're just going to have to go right back in to have that second attempt. So there won't be as much of a chance for learning and refreshing that knowledge. And next. So current process proctored by instructors in the classroom. Next is a secured testing platform, and the proctoring service is going to be overlaid with that. So our vendor for proctoring essentially we'll be monitoring head movements, eye placement, all those kind of things to ensure that there is no cheating for that exam. Okay, click. As I said, no remediation versus remediation. That may be a big change for participants, and we'll be watching to see how much impact that has on our passing rates. Next. So with the traditional classroom environment that we have, the certification test is done immediately after completion of the classroom portion. This will be the 3-day 6-module approach that I've talked about. Then they will be asked to immediately on the following day schedule and take the proctored exam, and then if they need a retake, we're going to give them a 2-day period, which Gerard added to this, and I wasn't aware of it until about 30 seconds ago. So things are always changing, and we need to be adaptive. Next. So as I mentioned to you guys, our class, first class is currently scheduled for early June. We will only deliver that class if our instructors for both our agency and our sister agency are comfortable with both the material and the platform. We're putting forth our best efforts right now to make sure that happens. If it doesn't happen, then we will be pushing those out a little bit. Our plan is to offer 200 to 250 seats. We plan to do these live webinars in groups of 50. So we're hoping to get 4 to 5 in before the end of the fiscal year. Because in Florida, certification is partly all about volume. With the statutory change we had about 6 years ago, we have, I think, close to 900 individuals expiring by the end of 2020. So we need to really keep our numbers as high as possible. And then we'll continue online training throughout social distancing measures. We may look at extending it as well if there are still hotspots around the state. We're very geographically diverse. So for instance, if we still see problems in Miami and Broward, there would be no reason for us to travel that way. And then we're like Jessica Adams said at the end of her presentation, we're definitely exploring the possibility of using this more permanently, as changing circumstances have forced us to find a way to change the way in which we work. Okay. So a quick summary for you guys. Our software, GoToTraining as the platform, Cavion and Examity are our secure testing site and the secure proctoring. Our process is been based in rapid prototyping and active communication between our agency, our sister agency, our leadership, and other partners. Gerard very kindly put his email address here. So you could always reach out to him. You could, of course, always reach out to me as well if you have questions. But that's the end for now. And I'm sure I have some questions.
Yes, you do, Daniel. Thank you so much. So we have quite a few questions. I'm going to try to go in as much order as possible. Quick apology. I know some people had said they couldn't see the polls. I'm not quite sure why you couldn't see the polls. They should just pop up. It might be a security setting, but I do apologize about that. So the first question we have is, a proctor exam primarily needed to authenticate the identity of the examiner? The exam is still open book, yes?
So our exams are not open book. It is for authentication, but it also is to ensure that they're actually delivering their own knowledge, that there aren't answer keys lying around, that they're not sharing information with others, because this is a certification course for us.
Next question, have you encountered any accessibility issues like sight or hearing impaired?
Not yet, but we are going to need to figure out a plan for that. Certainly, most of our courses that are online currently are being published in Articulate as well. So we do have some accessibility built into those. I think that our secure platform with Cavion and Examity will also be able to address that.
Wonderful. And what are the requirements to take the FCCM class?
So statutorily in Florida, if you're a contract manager who manages a contractual service or commodities contract that exceeds $100,000 annually, you're required to take this course.
Okay.
And there are about 4,000 of those around the state.
And then once certified, what is required to maintain certification?
Certification lasts for 4 years, and then we ask that individuals attend a recertification course, which also includes the same certification exam process at the end.
Excellent. And then let's see. I'm sorry to say other questions. I don't think we have any other questions for you, but I don't know if Jessica, if you wanted to jump in and answer, if you had anything you guys are doing to handle those with any impairments like speech or hearing?
Similar to Daniel, we're
Yeah.
basically just making the most use of the articulate tools as possible. We have the good little text-to-speech put into our RISE courses and also our articulate courses, and that's pretty much it right now.
Wonderful. Anyone else have any other questions for any of the panelists now? I know Linda wants to know if that's Mount Okeechobee behind you, Daniel, but
No, it is absolutely not. It is the first Google image I grabbed today.
that's how we do things. That's awesome. Does anyone else have any questions for him? Okay, looks like we have another question here. Super class, thanks. Thank you, Luis, we appreciate that. Does anyone else have anything? If not, we will go ahead and move on. No? All right, well, before we move on, I just want to thank all of our panelists so much for being with us here today. You guys were wonderful, and I hope that you guys got as much out of this as our attendees obviously have it. You guys have offered some great questions. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about our next steps, and I'll let Jordan go ahead and take over from here.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, so we just wanted to try to wrap together all the different things we talked about in part 1 webinar last week and then part 2 today. It's been a lot of information, and we're going to have the recordings available for you. We've only got 9 minutes, so we'll try to run through these quickly. I know a lot of you may be facing pressure to suddenly adapt your training into the online environment in whatever way you can in a short amount of time. While that may be the reality that you are facing, and it's certainly understandable, and in some cases you may just have to get something up as fast as you can, it's not the ideal way to do training. So just keep that in mind as you are able. The best way to start is just have a review of your learning objectives and what you're actually trying to teach with your training, and figure out the best way to adapt or modify those objectives to a virtual environment. Face-to-face learning and virtual learning, they're not the same. I mean, I don't care if you use video and all the engagement tools that you can possibly buy, it's not the same. Your learners are not going to absorb the information the same, especially in the middle of a pandemic. So, you know, just take a good hard look at your learning objectives. You may have to look at the content itself to see what can be adapted easily to a virtual environment and what can't. Think about what objectives are critical and that you have no choice but to find a way to present, and then which may be important but would be better suited for a different learning approach. Whatever approach you decide to use, you need to make sure that you tailor the content to fit that new approach. So that may mean downsizing your content or rearranging it. You also need to look at the timing of all of it and consider chunking it out into smaller chunks. I know, as we saw at the beginning, I mean, if people only have 24 minutes a week for learning and development, maybe try to shoot for 30-minute chunks of your training, spread out over a longer period of time if possible. I know that's not always possible, but also pay close attention to the learning activities that you use to generate participation in the environment. As we saw during the part 1 webinar last week, you need to be requiring people to engage with their computer and the content every 3 to 5 minutes, or their attention will drift, especially in an online environment. And Laurie demonstrated a lot of this last week, and we talked about a lot of different tools. So definitely check out the recording if you need more examples or information related to leading a live instruction like that. I know most platforms like Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, they all have interactive whiteboard options. You can create polls, quizzes, you can ask questions in the chat, have them respond in the chat. You can use tools to create games like the Kahoot game that we played last week. Just in the interest of time, if you all wouldn't mind to just type in the chat box some of the activities or tools that you have used that you use to encourage participation and engagement online when you're doing trainings online. If there's anything unique that you are using that you think works well, please type that in and just share that in the chat while we continue moving on. So also making sure that you choose the right modality for your learning objectives. As I said, not all modalities are effective for every type of learning objective. So make sure that you keep in mind all the different tools you have available to you and focus more on how you can get the most out of the tools that you have. And just keep that in mind. Think about what can be self-paced and what might have to be done in an instructor-led approach. I think a good rule of thumb there, if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, is that learning objectives at Bloom's level 1 and 2 might fit in a self-paced environment, but anything above level 2, you might need to consider for a virtual classroom style where you can have discussions and interaction and be able to engage with the content. So go ahead, Amanda, with the last couple slides there.
Sure. And Jordan already gave an example of what we're going to talk about next, which is incorporating social collaboration activities virtually. We have to make sure that we are not forgetting the social aspect of learning and development. And so any way you can get your learners to engage or you get to engage with them and they can engage with others is optimal. And obviously we talked about a number of different tools to do that. We talked about using Zoom's breakout rooms, for instance, even the chat box here where Jordan has you typing and inputting all of your examples of ways you can, get your students to answer questions and do things and interact is extremely key to getting that social collaboration within your trainings. Another thing along the same lines of collaboration is feedback and communication. So we really want to make sure, and I know a lot of our panelists today have spoken about this. I know Laurie has spoken about this too, is making sure you do not lose your learners along the way. So you want to develop a good, solid support system for them. If they have any questions or concerns during the training, that's, again, using the chat question and answer features are perfect in Zoom, for example. And I know other platforms like Zoom have those abilities as well. Making sure you're available or whatever trainer is doing the training is available to answer questions outside of class. If you have an LMS, like Absorb, for example, you might have a community board, and that is a great way for them to interact and they can provide feedback. And of course, you want to also develop a good collection strategy for feedback. Like Jessica Adams had said earlier, they were able to improve their courses because they received surveys after the courses were finished, and then they could go back in and change up their courses to reflect what the attendees were seeing and suggested as far as changes were concerned. And that is a very important thing. There's a lot of different ways to do surveys, SurveyMonkey, FormStack, Google Forms. And if you guys have any other survey tools, feel free to put them in that chat as well so that you can share them with each other, because there are a lot of great tools out there that a lot of people are going to utilize to make sure they get the feedback that they need. And then the last thing that you need to make sure you're doing when you're transitioning to virtual, and Jessica Potter actually touched on this earlier, is training your trainers on virtual learning. Like Jessica had said earlier, not everyone who trains in a classroom has ever trained online before. They may not be familiar with the technology that you're going to be putting in front of them or asking them to use to train virtually. And so you have to take that into consideration when you're transitioning to online content and making sure that you can train those instructors so they can develop these new skill sets. They may even have to develop the new skill sets on how to engage their learners virtually, which is where someone like Laurie Brown comes in to teach them how to interact well with the online environment. And you definitely want to make sure you're considering your time and resources that you need in order to train these people to be able to engage in that virtual online environment. So those are kind of your quick next steps that you need to take. And before we go, we do want to turn this over to Olivia Fry, who's our Director of Membership Engagement and Strategic Partnerships. So she can kind of give you a quick summary of the different resources that NASPO has right now for COVID-19 dealing with virtual learning. Take it away, Olivia.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Appreciate everyone being here today. We know that you have a lot going on, so I'll keep it brief. We do have 2 COVID-19 resource pages that will give you basically anything you need to know in responding to COVID-19 with your teams. We have one that you can find at NASPO.org that is available to the public, and then one that is also available for members only on the NASPO network. We do have several links of different resources to help you with virtual learning on those sites. We encourage you to take a look at them. If you have any questions or any links you'd like to share with us that we can disseminate to members, to the public via these sites, I encourage you to send those to me, and hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you, Olivia. So we got 1 minute left or less. I just want to wrap up with, in closing, in addition to the COVID-19 resources, of course, Procurement U's online self-paced courses are still available for everyone. So if you have staff that are currently needing some procurement classes or training, you got new people onboarding, and they need some basic procurement training, definitely check out our courses. They're still available as you all try to figure out the best way to provide training in this environment. But I just want to thank our panelists for a great presentation today and for providing some very useful examples. Thank you all so much for attending today and last week if you were with us. I hope you found this information helpful. We did record both of these, and we will be making it available on our YouTube channel. We also put together a resources page with links to articles that can help, some tools and other resources, and the contact information from our panelists today and from Laurie last week. So we're going to be providing that. We're going to post those resources, that resources document, in the chat, but there is also a link in there that will be included in the email that comes out from Zoom as an automatic thank you email. If you are needing or wanting a certificate that shows your contact hours for participating in these 2 webinars, we're going to have a link for that as well. I'll put it in the chat here in just a second, but it'll also be included in the thank you email that goes out. It's just a short form to put in your name and email to let us know you need a certificate. So basically just keep an eye out for the thank you email that'll come out tomorrow, because it'll have several links of helpful information for you. You can always, of course, email procurementu@naspo.org if you have any questions. But thank you all again. I'm going to post these links in the chat. Can't thank you enough for your participation, and I hope you all have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.